Welcome back, Crackle Addicts. I'm Lupinefiasco. This is Daily FaB Gameplay, and today we are playing Aurora Shooting Star. For anyone who is new to the channel, what we do here is review replays of games I played on the Talishar.net client days or weeks ago, after enough time has passed that I lose my bias and can more objectively judge the quality of my games. I will talk through turn cycles as if I were taking them now, explaining my thought processes for the lines I would take, and compare that to the lines I did take. We either learn from my mistakes or reinforce good play patterns with the overall goal of tightening and optimizing our gameplay in the future, taking down paper events, and walking away with that shiny cardboard. If you would like to check out the deck I'm playing here or try it for yourself on Talishar, there is a FaB deck link in the video description below. While you're down there, if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to my channel. It is the best free way to support me and to make sure that you see daily FaB gameplay in your video feed 5 days a week. If you'd like to engage further, there is a link to my Discord and to my Patreon. Without further ado, let's jump right into the action. The Dio matchup can be a little hard to navigate because you can't sit down with one concrete plan and then just execute it. You have to be ready to pivot between aggro and fatigue based on what the Dio is doing. So if we look over at our Dio side of the board, we see that she brought 71 cards into this matchup. Now that might just be a tournament-winning list pulled from FaB, loaded into Talishar, and no sideboard guide used. It could also be an attempt to not get fatigued by an Aurora who brings 8 defense reactions into the matchup, like I do. So really the main priority playing against Dio is to not get hit by boom grenades as much as possible. That means using armor and cards from hand to block when our opponent has an onboard boom grenade, and having defense reactions ready to block at instant speed when your opponent brings a boom grenade in from the top of the deck. You probably aren't going to fatigue your Dio in the traditional sense of running them out of cards. Now she is going to help you do that by banishing her own deck to boost effects. It is more that you need to know when to be a mid-range hero and just block everything, or an aggro hero and race. Now the hand that we have here would indicate that we are at least going to attack on turn 0. We do want to go first in this matchup when we can, not because we want to go first, but because we don't want Dio to go first. The reason being that we want to punish her for having items in hand by virtue of them not blocking. We also want to pressure cards out of Dio's hand so that she can't pitch them to play items off the top. We could go very balls to the wall and play Arc Lightning, then play Flittering Charge and 2 Ravenous Ravels, which would get 4 points of damage out of the Arc Lightning, and presumably 16 points out of the hand overall. But I want an arsenal, and if my opponent has cards that can block, then us throwing 16 damage only to get met by 12 points of block doesn't really help us win. So I do want to just send both Ravels and the Flittering and Arsenal Arc Lightning set up for a future turn, and just test Dio's hand to see if she has cards that can play defense. That's 1. We are going to leak 1 point over the top, which is still fine by me. We get another red 3 block. So far we've seen red outpace, red zipper hit. Let's see what this Flittering Charge gets met with. Another red zipper hit? Kind of interesting. I don't mind getting all these red cards out of my Dio opponent's hand. It makes me wonder if this last card is a blue, and if it was, then we get really punished for just arsenaling a card and passing the turn. But who knows, maybe we also inadvertently helped our -IO opponent filter an unplayable hand into something a little better. We have a Shelter from the Storm and a Sigil of Suffering in hand. That said, I do still want to play my Ravenous Ravel, my Arc Lightning, and my Skyward Serenade. The Arc Lightning here is worth 4 points of damage, 5 if we pitch a defense reaction into Starfall. Ravel should be worth 4, Serenade should be worth 4. So we're getting presumably 13 to 15 damage out of 4 cards here, and then arsenaling our last defense reaction. Like I said, there are no onboard boom grenades, which means we do not need to block any of this incoming damage. We can just sit on our D-Reacts until Dash flashes a boom grenade off the top of the deck, at which point we play a defense reaction and now start committing much more heavily to blocking her follow-up attacks. But that Fast and the Furious doesn't get blocked. Dash attempting to play a boom grenade out of hand. Now that could indicate that we should play a defense reaction here, but I really don't want to spend 3 or 4 points of block on a blue 0 to 60, so I'm just not going to block here, which means that we will end up pitching one of these D-reacts into Starfall just so that we don't take an intellect penalty. Which D-react should we pitch? For me, it's Sigil of Suffering. Definitely one of our better D-reacts, especially if we can draw a Channel Lightning Valley off the top of our deck. But Dash has AB1 in the form of Achilles Accelerator. She plays a lot of blues and yellows. She can always pitch into Teklo Foundry Heart after boosting in order to keep a spare resource around to pay for AB1. So I'm not confident that my Sigil of Suffering is even going to deal arcane damage, whereas Shelter from the Storm will always block 4. So that is what I'm going to stick into my arsenal, and I'm going to pitch the Sigil of Suffering to come in with Starfall for 2 plus 1 point of arcane. Dash just taking all of this damage means that we are very likely in some trouble, and especially so when we draw 4 cards that don't block. And now we feel very silly not playing Zap Clappers and having just pitched a Sigil of Suffering rather than holding it. We have really no way out of taking just a bunch of damage this turn. We could put all of our armor in front of the throttle in order to block the 6 and prevent the onboard boom grenade. At the same time, then what do we do? Now we're just very face up that we have nothing else going on. So we're just going to take 9 points of damage here and hope that it isn't that bad, that the rest of the turn is fine and not just lethal. This really is tragic that this is what we have going on. Now, we do have the Shelter from the Storm in Arsenal. We could have given maybe Balance of Justice or Dyadic Carapace to block the throttle and then used Shelter in order to cover up the other 4, but I would rather just save the Shelter for something like a heist, something where I pretty well know that I need to stop this on hit and there is no follow-up, right? If we block that throttle, then we get hit by this throttle. Thankfully, Dash did have the Master Cog on top of the Cerebellum Processor and couldn't just flash in the Cerebellum Processor, which would have been very bad for us. If we didn't block the last throttle, which came in for 9, we're definitely not gonna block this throttle, which comes in for 6. We are just hoping, again, that the bleeding is not gonna be so bad. We still have the option to play our Shelter from the Storm from Arsenal, and maybe we should have, just considering what our turn looks like. We have to block this T-Bone with Snapdragon Scalers. What we're doing on our turn is pitching Channel Lightning Valley into Grasp of the Arknight to make a rune chant. Then we are going to pitch our Discharge to attack with Starfall for 1 and 1. We're going to respond to the rune chant by playing Channel Lightning Valley. Dash can prevent us from drawing a card by giving a card from hand and armor, but it's kind of the best we've got, and I think given that we were supposed to block that throttle with the Shelter, not to cover it up entirely, although we could have also given Grasp of the Arknight in order to play around a boom grenade off the top. It's more that we just wanted to clear out our arsenal so that we could put this electromagnetic somersault into it. I am kind of assuming that Dash is going to give us a card and armor to not let us draw, especially considering that our turn is apparently very bad. If Dash is looking and seeing that we pitched a channel and a discharge, she should be able to pretty safely assume that we don't have an attack. Although she is going to let the Arcane go through, and that does let us send 5 more damage this turn with the Shockwave fusing it with Somersault. And then we get to play the Somersault to bring the Shockwave back to hand. So we are taking an intellect penalty here, but we are at least getting to end our turn with a 3 block that should let us play defense in the face of what is going to apparently be another 5-card banger from Dash. If we didn't have the Shelter from the Storm in our arsenal, I would not have somersaulted the Shockwave back to hand. I would have just arsenaled the somersault and hoped to draw 2 attacks. Without knowing what the top card of our deck is, that may not have worked out, considering that we draw into another Shelter and a Discharge. But we have no way of knowing that right now. What we do know is that this hand thankfully does block pretty well. We still have all 6 of our armor. We have a 3 block in Shockwave. We have 2 Shelter from the Storms. And we know that we are hopefully going to be able to keep our Flittering Charge. We want to play Discharge, play Flittering, attack for 7, hit, draw a card from Channel Lightning Valley, arsenal that card, and hopefully survive both this turn and the next. This Twin Drive for 5 is not threatening lethal. There are no Boom Grenades. We don't need to block this. If Dash does find a Boom Grenade off the top, we can block it with Shelter from Arsenal and discard Shelter from hand. The fact that the Twin Drive is boosting twice tells me that there's either a Pulse Wave Harpoon behind it or a Maximum Velocity. In either case, we will get to use our defense reactions. I don't think that we should shelter this one. We should shelter the next, a future attack. We know that we will get to use all of the cards in our hand on our next turn. We will not take another intellect penalty, so I think using the Shelter is wrong. The fact that Dash passed priority to us meant that there was not a Boom Grenade on top of the deck, so we should have held our defense reactions for when there was something on top of the deck that we needed to care about, such as this heist. The heist can be covered by Balance of Justice, Dyadic Carapace, and Arcanic Shockwave, which is what I am going to use to block it. I'm assuming that the last card in Dash's hand is Maximum Velocity, which we will cover with our Shelter from the Storm. We don't need to use Grasp of the Arknight to block 4/2. We can. I think I end up doing so, just because my life total is getting pretty low and I want to make sure that I use all of my armor block before I die. Here we are going to correctly use Shelter from the Storm, noting that Flittering Charge for 7 is very likely to draw a card, and we don't want to take another intellect penalty this game. Dash evens up the life totals, bringing us both to parity at 12. We are going to put her lower than that, unless she gives us 2 cards from hand and Tekla Foundry Heart, or 3 cards from hand. She is just giving us the Foundry Heart though, so she's going to take 5. We draw an attack that we can arsenal. It isn't the best thing that we could have drawn, but it also isn't the worst. The hand we draw into is a little tragic. We wish that some of these 2 blocks blocked for 3, or maybe had some natural go again, but at the same time, we do at least know that we can convert these cards. We still have our Snapdragon Scalers, so we will get to, hopefully, play Snatch, press it, snap it, play Second Strike from Arsenal for 4 go again, and then something happens. Either we can Arsenal the card that we drew from Snatch, or we can play the card that we drew from Snatch. We're sitting at 5 life here, with 2 points of armor block remaining, and 2 cards from hand that we wouldn't mind blocking with. We really want to keep the Snatch if we can. Second Strike plus Lightning Press does not threaten lethal damage. We are going to block the T-Bone. We can give the Snapdragon Scalers. Dash has already played an item off the top of the deck, so we aren't in any danger of dying to a random Boom Grenade. We do need to block this Throttle, and we know that Dash has 2 Symbiosis Shot attacks coming after this at a minimum. She will have an action point from having cranked the Cerebellum Processor, and she got an action point from cranking the Boom Grenade that she played off the top of the deck. So we are just trying to survive the damage that we know is coming. We cannot play around Dash using Cerebellum Processor to draw another attack and then attacking us with it, but if she does do that, then we know that we can break our Balance of Justice. So how are we going to block this Throttle? We can just put an Exude Confidence in front of it and go to 2, then block the next Symbiosis Shot with 2, for 2 with Exude Confidence, then block the next Symbiosis Shot with Grasp and Dyadic, or we could just use Grasp, go to 1, and keep our single point of armor on Dyadic Carapace. Maybe we block a 4 power 0 to 60, or another blue throttle, and that keeps us alive if Dash flashes a boom grenade off the top of the deck. In any case, we aren't going to die this turn to the damage that we can see. We might die to a card off the top that Dash is able to play, but the fact that she isn't using Cerebellum Processor yet means that she probably doesn't have anything to do. The fact that she would have had an action point after using the processor meant that if she had a playable card on top of the deck, she would have drawn it, because she definitely does not want to break Achilles Accelerator here to get an action point and go down to 0 AB, which turns on all of our Sigil of Sufferings, instant speed shocks, etc. So we're going to snatch for 4, pretty confident that Dash is going to give us her Foundry Heart and the maximum velocity to at least play around Snapdragon Scalers, but she does not play around the Lightning Press, which is great. We get to send Second Strike for 4 go again, which takes a card out of her hand, and Flittering Charge for 4 no go again, which takes a card out of her hand, probably putting her down to 2 and leaving her with just one thing that she can attack us with. We still have our point of armor on Dyadic Carapace. We hopefully will draw cards that block, unlike on our all-instant turn. So all we've got from Dio is a Boom Grenade plus a Symbiosis Shot. Thankfully, no attack that can boost, let Dash break the Achilles, and then draw a card with Cerebellum Processor. Instead, we just have to think about how to block the Symbiosis Shot. We're at 1. So we have a few options, and I don't think it really matters which one we use. It's either going to be block with Sink Below, Sink the Somersault just to see if there's something better on top of our deck. Our plan is definitely E-Strike, bottom a card, Lightning Press up to 10. But outside of sinking, we could also block with the E-Strike and then somersault it back to hand. But I think that is the worst of the two lines, because I want to hide information from Dio as long as I can. I don't want her to know that an E-Strike is what's coming. I don't think it particularly matters. But between the two options, sinking the Symbiosis Shot shows Dash 1 card, E-Strike Somersault shows her 2, and shows her 1 card that will be in our hand at the start of our next turn. Sinking the Somersault doesn't really matter because we know that we're going to bottom the Somersault or something else to the E-Strike. We draw into another Sink Below, which is interesting. It does give us the option to E-Strike for 7 and Arsenal Sink, but we can just kill Dash. We don't need to, set up for blocking her next turn. We can just kill her and make sure there is no next turn. So we're going to E-Strike for 7. We're going to hold this press to bring it up to 10. Dash does play a Null Time Zone off the top of the deck, which is a pretty sick flip, but Lightning Press is an instant, so we can respond to the Null Time Zone by playing the Lightning Press. Our E-Strike is already an attack that can be targeted by Lightning Press, so we don't get punished for having this happen to us in the layer step. And the reason we need to do the press in response to the Null Time Zone is if Dash resolves Null Time Zone and calls Lightning Press, we don't get to kill her this turn. So by playing the press, we aren't tipping our hand. If Dash has 3/3 blocks in hand, then she blocks 9 in front of our 10 and lives. But if the Null Time Zone resolves and Dash does call Lightning Press, we just don't get to play it. We'll arsenal it. We can play it on our next turn because Null Time Zone only affects our hand. It doesn't affect our arsenal. But we'll just kill her instead. She only has the 2/3 blocks. So kind of a crazy game. Very fast game. We're averaging 16 points a turn. Dash is averaging a little less than that at 15.33. The all-instant hand was crazy, and it just happened to line up where Dash didn't really have big damage on that turn. If we draw 4 instants on the max V turn, we'd probably die. If we draw 4 instants and Dash does manage to flash in another Boom Grenade off the top of the deck, we'd probably die. So it just happened to work out that we didn't get turbo punished for drawing 4 instants, but we really can just find ourselves in a very bad spot. And the fact that we had bottomed our Sigil of Suffering meant that we couldn't benefit from those two CLVs. Now, we would have needed to block a blue T-bone with the Sigil of Suffering to get our full value, which isn't insane, but it's at least something. Having Zap Clappers there would have been much, much better, because then we block 2 on 1 and draw 2 cards and deal 1 point of arcane damage. But there is a larger discussion to be had on, is Zap Clappers even good enough into Dash.io? A hero with reliable AB, a hero who can cheat out resources with Teklo Foundry Heart, a hero who does play a large number of blues and yellows, and a hero against whom breakpoints are very good. So we managed to luck out a win here, but I do think this very easily could have been a loss with very little input from us. We had the intellect penalty from not blocking a throttle with a Shelter from the Storm, and while we did get to use that shelter to create a Veil on the next turn, and we saw that we would have drawn another 2 block, which would have let us use our Somersault much better. Sort of ends up being a wash, but just something to keep in mind that you don't need to get full value out of your defense reactions when you can instead just not lose value from taking that intellect penalty. I hope you enjoyed this game. I hope you learned something. If so, be sure to zap clap that like button. My comments are always open for any questions or feedback. If you haven't already done so, please consider a YouTube subscription. It's free, it helps me out a lot. I have a Blue Sky, a Discord, and a Patreon, links to which are in the video description below. Patrons at the Arc Lightning tier or higher will get access to the matchup guides for this deck and all of my decks forever. If you want to do your IRL daily FaB gameplay reviews, you can use the link to Codex Journal using code Lupine10, LUPINE10 at checkout to get 10% off. It helps a lot with writing down how the games went, what conclusions you drew, any lessons learned. I use mine for any Battle Hardens, Callings, the Pro Tour. It works great. I will be back later this week with more daily FaB gameplay, and until then, take care.